Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Well, the meeting's grown a little bit. I had my back to everybody. I am John B., and I am a grateful, unhyphenated alcoholic of the Jurassic Park variety. Oh, and it's great to be here. My sobriety date is August 18th, 1965. That's a long time ago. And I can remember walking through the doors of the Burbank group at a Saturday noon stag that they had just started. One more time, trying to figure out why I can't seem to get sober and stay sober. Because, like Eric, I'd bounced in and out for about 3 years. In fact, my first meeting was at 1717 Magnolia, and most of you probably haven't even heard that address, but that was the big address in Burbank for a number of years. And I came in, Alcoholics Anonymous, an avowed agnostic. Don't talk to me about God. I couldn't stand it when you people were talking about God as I bounced in and out. You know, this was the time when women had their hair all up and lacquered, you know, and it was silver blue, and they had the push-up goodies and, you know, and dresses. And they all wanted to hug you, and they left, you know, arpege or something all over your body as you walked away. Powder coming up into your nose. You know. And I was a young man. I was, you know, boy, this place is boring. You know. And the guys, they seemed to think that the harder they shook your hand and the longer they did, the more sobriety you would get. You know, and you'd go home, you felt like you'd worked out with the barbells. You know. First meeting I attended, my sister, who was sober, my old drinking buddy, who failed me many times in her first year of sobriety, because when I'd go to her house with a hangover, she always had a bottle, and she no longer did, and that was a revolting development, you know. And she took me to my first meeting. I wanted to get my wife off my back, my boss off my back, the creditors off my back, and so I went to A&A. I'll never forget, it was a Sunday night at Burbank. Now, if you've never gone to a Sunday night meeting at Burbank, it's got to be the most boring meeting in the world. Everybody is sitting there saying, "Oh God, tomorrow's Monday," you know, and it just. But there's quite a few people there, and there's this group of older women that my sister hung out with, and they walked up and shook my hand and hugged me and all that, and they turned to my sister and say, "Oh, Beverly, is this the one we've been praying for?" You know. But I was committed. I had a big book under my arm when I left that meeting, and of course, being the alcoholic I was never going to drink again, and I might as well throw all the other vices out the window, and I could quit smoking that night, you see. Good way to start sobriety, you know. But that didn't last, and I bounced in and out. And I went to meetings smelling of booze a few times, and people would kind of move away from you, you know. And I had a real problem with God, because I was my own God. And I almost choked on the Serenity Prayer and the Lord's Prayer at every meeting that I went to. But you see, you know, there are bold alcoholics and there are some chicken alcoholics. And I was one of these alcoholics that I had to have your approval You know, if there was 200 people in a room and one person didn't like me, I'd spend the whole night working on that one person. God, that was a lot of work. And so I would say the serenity prayer, and then I would get up and hold the hands for the Lord's Prayer. I would always jockey for a soft pair of hands and some perfume. You know, what's a young guy to do? You're not going to hold some guy's hand, you know, except in the men's stag, and they all look like they could beat the poop out of me, you know, so I'd hold their hands. But I had this problem, and I got sober, and I went to a whole lot of meetings. And I said that Serenity Prayer and that Lord's Prayer I don't know how many times just by rote, with nothing afterwards, nothing before it, other than the meeting and the meeting afterwards down at some restaurant where we'd have coffee and pie or whatever. And then my sponsor, I picked a good sponsor. He was the most popular guy in the Burbank group, so I picked him. He didn't tell me he had never sponsored anybody before, but it worked for me. And he took me through the book, because he didn't know what he was doing, but he didn't admit that to me, so we just read the book together. And he set a pattern. He only asked me to do one thing. He says, what I so freely give to you, you must give away to one other alcoholic after we're finished. I agreed to that, just one. I wouldn't have to sponsor any more than one person after he got through with me. And then he introduced me to a retreat, a spiritual retreat for Alcoholics Anonymous out at Manresa Retreat House. And I went up there really with an umbrella because I knew the whole place was going to come down around my ears. I saw that priest with a little white patch, and it scared me to death because I knew he was going to point his bony finger at me and say, "You're a heathen. You're an unbeliever," you know. But they won me over with their kindness and love. And working through the program and watching things happen, good things happen to bad people, or sick people, I had this metamorphosis, or this slowly changing concept of what I used to think a vengeful God was into one that had some kindness, maybe some love in their soul, you know. And I watched the actions of the people in Alcoholics Anonymous as they helped one another and as they helped me. So I started to not be so defensive, but it only took me 6 years to finally realize one day that there was a God, that He had blessed me, that He had given His grace to me, and allowed me to stay sober long enough to respond to that power greater than myself in the manner in which I think He probably wanted me to start responding. And then it was just a gradual, one step at a time, one day at a time, 1 year at a time, growth from that point to where I'm at today. And I'd like to say that I'm spiritually perfect. Well, compared to where I came and I said, "F you, God," in a stag meeting one day, and the poor little guy sitting over there shaking in the corner says, "Can he say that?" And the guy next to him said, "He can say anything here because it's Alcoholics Anonymous." Thank God it's Alcoholics Anonymous that allows somebody like me to come into the midst and grow at my own pace, hit my realizations one at a time, looking at my defects of character one at a time. And boy, that's slow, you know. I hit that step 6, and okay, God, you know, you can have my defects of character. And I went right on to 7, but they weren't gone. And I kept trying to help God remove my defects of character, and I found out that's what my shortcoming was. I'm telling God when to remove these defects of character, and He's going, "Ha, ha, ha, John. We'll get to it, and it'll hurt, It will hurt. And every defective character I've given up that I'm aware of, I have given up through pain and suffering. I didn't gladly just hand away my arrogance to God. You can see I haven't quite worked on gluttony. But it's getting better, Today I have a relationship with a God I understand who was given to me in Alcoholics Anonymous so freely by a bunch of recovering drunks that, as the book says, many of us return to our churches of choice, or we join and we find we're quick to see where religion has some answers. And today I'm a Stephen minister with the church that I belong to. Much like AA, I work one-on-one with people that have problems. They don't have to be alcoholics. They just have problems and need somebody to sit down. You gave me that ability. At my 40th birthday anniversary party, I had half AA and half church people there. Only the AA spoke. And they blew the church people out of the water. The following Sunday, the minister asked me if he could use some of the examples in his sermon of what spiritual people do. Choked me up, because you are so great. What you've given me in my time in Alcoholics Anonymous is a quiet heart and a peaceful mind, and a knowing that I belong to this universe. I'm not here by mistake. I wasn't dropped off by a flying saucer like I used to think I was. That people who cross my path in Alcoholics Anonymous, what they see is what they get, and what I say is what I mean. Today I'm a man among men instead of trying to be a tower above everybody. You see, when I first got sober, I decided, 3 years I'll be secretary of the Burbank Group. 4 years I'll be secretary of the San Fernando Valley Convention. 5 years I'll be in New York as a delegate. 40 years I live in Castaic, a truck stop. And instead of being that all-star actor I wanted to be, or that renowned salesman I tried to be, I'm a jailer up at good old Peter Pitch's detention center. Now, if you'd asked me a few years ago, or a number of years ago, you want to be a jailer, John? I would have said, you crazy. But you know something? God has a sense of humor, but He also has a sense of great wisdom. I'm sitting in there with 4,000 inmates, and 85% of them are in there because they did something stupid behind alcohol or drugs. What an audience. What an audience. Every day I practice the principles of this program in my work. I try very hard to work them every day in my home, because I'm married to a black belt Al-Anon. Some of you know her, and the Al-Anons all know her. And we've got 2 programs going in the house. And I've been so gifted that sponsor said to me, all you have to do to repay me is to give it away to one other recovering alcoholic. That led to another, that led to another, that led to another, that finally led to Eric. Oh God, I'm glad I had great experience. Oh, all kidding aside, our primary purpose is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. If you do that, I'll guarantee you can be standing up here at the Oldtimers meeting pontificating about how grateful you are that all these people are in your life. Thank you, God.
Thank you, John. Yeah, that was interesting, the comment he made about the pastor. I also, it reminded me that I also heard that pastor share from a sermon one Sunday to the congregation that we need to be more like the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. They're the only people I've ever seen who really practice unconditional love. And I thought that was interesting. Gene B., would you please come up and share with us?
My name's really Jean C. I'm married to Jim Baker, but I'm Jean Copley. I like to keep my own name. My name's Jean. I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Fran for asking me to come and speak at this meeting. It's a privilege to participate in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And wow, there are a lot of people here. When I sat down, there were just 3 or 4, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a small meeting. But it's a great convention. And I want to thank Georgette, my good friend who drove me up here. One thing about getting to be an old-timer is things happen. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, so I don't like to drive the freeways. I can drive in my neighborhood. And also, if I don't recognize you, I'm not ignoring you. It's because I probably don't know who you are. But Alcoholics Anonymous has been, well, it's, as someone else has said, it's been an amazing thing for me. I came to my first meeting September 17th, 1969. That was the day I had ruined my oldest son's birthday. But it was December 9th was my sobriety date. By then I had decided I was a real alcoholic and also given up the tranquilizers and the sleeping pills, naturally doctor prescribed. But it took me a while to realize that these were not the things to do either. I don't know quite how far back to start. My family thought I had a drinking problem, especially my husband at that time. Oh, and I'll stop here and say my husband, Jim Baker, who's now my husband, couldn't be here because he was sick today. And he loves to do things like this. He loves speaking. I just do it because I'm supposed to, but he loves to do it. So he would, so everybody know that he's sorry that he can't be here. But anyhow, my husband, my first husband, my only other husband, we had been going to a marriage counselor because I thought we were having trouble with our marriage and trouble with a lot of other things. And as time went on, the subject started to be more and more about me and more about my drinking. And it got horribly uncomfortable. So I had decided that, well, my drinking may be a problem to them, but it's not a problem to me, so I continued to drink. And I quit seeing this counselor. But I did start doing something that he had asked me to do, and that was I started writing about all my problems. and naturally, my whole journal was full of all my problems with my husband and my 3 kids. But it seems like even when you're drinking, that if you keep writing, the truth kind of comes out. I was writing and finally it was kind of like it just came out my pencil. That, Jean, you're a pill-taking, drinking woman. You aren't the woman you thought you were. And I hadn't been that woman for about 15 years. So I decided that I would stop drinking. Well, you know how that goes with an alcoholic. we were on vacation when I was doing all this writing, so I thought, well, I'll quit drinking as soon as we get off this vacation. Then I'll quit drinking after my sister and I do such and such. And then I'll quit drinking such and such time. And then I guess I had to surrender to the booze. One night I put the kids in bed, plunked the bottle down on the coffee table, which I usually fixed them in a glass and everything, and took a glass out there and just sat there and proceeded to get drunk, which was kind of an honest thing to do because I'd been getting drunk for a long time and pretending that that isn't what I was doing. So my husband came home and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm drunk and I'm going to get drunker." And he, of course, it was kind of like the truth hit the fan. He took the bottle and threw it out and, dumped all the liquor out. And, oh, God, I just raised a fit, started throwing dishes around. Finally, I ran up to the top of the stairs, and in all my dignity, he was an attorney. And I called down the stairs, "Tomorrow I'm going to find myself a good lawyer and find out what my alcoholic rights are." Of course, a couple of things happened then. One, that was the first time alcoholic had ever crossed my lips. And the other was that I realized, when I was drinking or drunk, I had absolutely no rights. That I was at the mercy of anything and everybody. That he could take my kids away, anything could happen. And I just hated that feeling. I just couldn't cope with that. And the next day, I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to I called the Glendale Club. And I kept calling them and talking to them a little bit and hanging up, and calling to them, talking to them, hanging up. And I finally, and they wanted to send somebody out, but I didn't want anybody to come to my house. It looked a little like an alcoholic housewife's house. And so I decided to go down to the Glendale Club, and I put on my last clean blouse and my sunglasses and made my way down to the Glendale Club. And there were a couple of ladies there that were so kind to me. And, of course, one thing, when I called the club, this guy, I think his name was Mike, answered. And he asked me if I was having a little problem with drinking. And I was so glad he put it that way, because that was all I could admit to. It actually took me from September 17th to December 9th, and still taking pills and still having a couple of times of drinking to really be convinced that I was really an alcoholic. But these ladies were very nice. One of them told the story about doing her ironing, and this was something I identified with. She's doing her ironing, and she went to sleep. Of course, she passed out on the sofa by the ironing board, and she set the iron down flat. And when she came to here, the ironing board was smoldering. So she takes it and puts it out on the patio and shuts the patio doors and went back to sleep. So, they kept telling me funny stories like that. And it was good for me because I was really a tragic case when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't think, in the first place, I really didn't think any other woman was an alcoholic like I was. When I was a kid, I'd read the article in the Saturday Evening Post about Alcoholics Anonymous, but for somehow or other, it kind of haunted me, really, because I always tried to control my drinking. I thought, well, if I don't drink this much, I won't be an alcoholic. Of course, it didn't work. And the other thing I believe I thought was that, men became alcoholics, because at that time I think it was mainly men. Got kind of a mind blank here. But I went to that first, and they told me to meet them the next day at the Burbank Hall, where they went. So I went over there, and just as I walked it, first the lady at the coffee bar said her name was Sonny, and I told her that mine was Jean. And she says, "My Jean, hi Jean, that's clean." I don't know, for some reason, just the way people are in Alcoholics Anonymous was so wonderful to me. You know, I was I didn't consider myself insane or off balance, but I was in kind of an uptight way. Nothing was funny and everything was so serious. And, you know, you go to Alcoholics Anonymous and they laugh at everything. And and it was such a relief to me to laugh. And also to cry. Oh, my God, I spent the first year bawling. If anybody said anything nice to me, I cried. And John was talking about the prayers. I loved the Serenity Prayer. It was a prayer I had never heard, so I had no prejudices against it, because I was a little bit like John. I didn't know if I was an atheist or an agnostic or what I was. I'd read in Time magazine once that God is dead. I think that was the headline on it. And so I guess I believed that. But I loved the Serenity Prayer, and then every time we said the Lord's Prayer, I cried. That first day I just started, But when I walked into the meeting, the leader was saying, if you're here full of hate and fear, you're in the right place. And, you know, he didn't really mention drinking. He mentioned hate and fear. And I thought, oh, wow, I am in the right place. And the people were so wonderful. And it took me several months to realize I was really an alcoholic. I thought they were real nice people, and it was good for them. And I thought the men were trying to flirt with me. I don't know if they were or not. I don't think I was in the best shape. But it kind of, gave me a little jazz. So Burbank has been my home group all the time. And, I love that group. And we were there in that building for 37 years. And I remember them all talking about 1717. And then now we're down on Winona. And I'd like to invite all of you to come and see us. One of the things that impressed me so were the women of Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember Helen Rogers. She came we got a lot of good speakers in Burbank. It was a big group at that time. And she came and she gave the most beautiful talk. And she was the first woman that made it all right for me to be an alcoholic. And one of the things she talked about was commitment. And she said Alcoholics Anonymous was the first thing that she had made a total commitment to. And, really that has been my experience too. I have made a total commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for longer than I've ever done anything in my life. But because of that commitment, I can make others. Jim and I have been together now for, I believe it's 33 years. So that's a long commitment too. And then I heard the first woman to become sober in the Los Angeles area. Her name was Sybil and a long string of other names, and Corwin. I can't remember all the others. But she told about her experiences as the first woman in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was great too. And she told about them telling her to gather up all these women. They had letters from New York, and so she went and met all these women that had sent in letters, and they told her to tell them just to come to the meeting, that there was a place where they would get sober, and not to tell them anything else because she didn't know anything else. and then she thought she was in charge of the women. So naturally, someplace along the line, there were a few women that decided she wasn't in charge. So she was just a real interesting, real alcoholic woman. And then my sponsor, who she wasn't my original sponsor, but the sponsor I've been with for a long time. Her name is, for most people probably know her as Jerry Bates, and it's now Jerry Spalazzo. But she was such an example to me. Her husband was sick, and she was selling real estate, and she just seemed to be able to do everything, which is, I was never able to do everything. I was one of these non-functioning alcoholics. And I just admired her so, that she could carry on her work this way, take care of her husband, and still sponsor women and be active in Alcoholics Anonymous. She moved away to Oklahoma, so I only get to talk to her on the phone. But I love that lady, and then I love all the girls that I have sponsored. Georgette is one of the ones that's here with me today. And excuse me, I didn't know I was going to get emotional about that. But I do love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I always had a really good life. And the only problem is I didn't know it. And it kind of took Alcoholics Anonymous to get me to come to myself and to come to realize. I grew up with good parents. We were in the Depression era and poor, but they were religious, good people. I was married to a good man who, I couldn't see at the time, and I ruined that. So fortunately, now I lucked out. I got married to another good man, and I have a good life that I know is good. So I thank you all for that.
Thank you very much, Gene. Next, I'd like to call up Don C., please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Crandall. I'm an alcoholic. And if you're worried about anonymity, I worried about it for a long time, too. And then I recall that just prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a flat tire on my 66 Plymouth, and I had been out drinking that day, and I rolled around the corner to my house, drove right through the garage door, went into the house and had a big fight with the wife, and the cops were there in 10 minutes, but nobody in my neighborhood knew that I drank. Do we have any new people here today? Less than 30 days? No? Okay. Oh, my sobriety date is June the 28th, 1967. It hasn't been necessary, nor have I taken a drink of alcohol from that day or any other mind-bending chemical, by the way, from that day until this. And I always like to put the qualifier in there because I like to tell the story about the guy who comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he said, come to a podium like this, and he said, since I've been coming to AA, he said it hadn't been necessary for me to take a drink. And he sat down, and his beautiful Al-Anon wife jarred him right between her ribs. She said, "You were drunk last week." He said, "Yeah, but it wasn't necessary." To hear John and Gene talk about some of the places that we had in the older days and some of the things that we did sort of revived a few things that I had forgotten about. I had forgotten about 1717 Magnolia, and I'd been to the meeting there. So it's a good thing, and thank you, Fran, for the privilege of participating in the meeting, and thank all of you for attending. You know, this wouldn't have been much of a meeting with just John and I. I'm going to let you in on a big secret. There's some of you that probably don't know. And it was a secret that everybody gave everybody when we first came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that secret is, if you don't take the first drink, you'll never get drunk. And I think we forget about that today. Because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, number one, I wasn't an alcoholic. Two, it wasn't going to work for me. And three, I was just going to stay here long enough to get my stuff together and get down the road. And how come I'm here 38 years later? The reason is because Alcoholics Anonymous fulfilled something that you told me that you would do for me. And that was, you told me that you would show me a way to go one day without a drink and be relatively comfortable with it. You didn't tell me you were going to do anything else for me. That's what you told me. And then, then I had a problem like John with God. And one of the other things that we used to talk about in AA is bring the body. The mind will come later. And that's how we got here to come to believe. And I didn't believe when I got here. I'll tell you how I thought. I took a look at all of the people who were talking about God. They had blue hair, gray hair, no hair at all, and they were all on the wrong side of 50. They needed God. They were on the way out. Here I am, gray hair, wrong side of 50, and I have a God. But it took me a while in Alcoholics Anonymous to get that God. It took me some time here to come to a realization of how God worked in my life. And I take my definition of as having tapped an unsuspected inner resource. And that's what I use today. And you know, we make some real tactical errors in AA. And I made one day. I walked up to a gal that was Franny's sponsor, I think, Rosalie Matthews. I said, Rosalie, how do I know what's God's will and what's my will? Rosalie said, well, if you want to do it, it's probably your will. If you don't want to do it, it's probably God's will. It made sense to me then, and it makes sense to me now. So, as you can tell, I like to have fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I believe that when I don't have any more fun, I'm getting out. Pulling the pin on this thing. Because I've enjoyed sobriety the whole time that I'm here. I've never had a particular problem with maintaining my sobriety. I hear a lot of people that do that. And why is that? I don't exactly know. But I just know that I keep doing the things that I've been doing for the last 38 years, and it seems to go together all right. Now, those things that I have been doing over the last 38 years are actions that I need to take in order for me to have what Silkworth talks about as a psychic change. And I don't know how to do all of those things by myself. But with the help of a higher power who puts those actions in front of me that I need to take on a daily basis, I'm able to do that. And I'm able to stay relatively comfortable in my sobriety. I am a firm believer that unless you take the action required in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, your sobriety will either be precarious or non-existent. And I need to take those actions not once in my life, but on a continuous basis. I need to keep doing what it is that I need to do. Because I don't know about any of you, but my character defects and shortcomings just didn't all vanish in one fell swoop. They're still here, lots of them. So I need to continue to work on them. And sometimes the action I need to take is no action. My book talks to me about restraint of pen and tongue. Pen is easy. I'm lazy. I don't like to write. But my tongue is sharp. And so these are things that I have to work on. And I have a God that puts situations in my life on a daily basis that makes it possible for that to happen to me. Now, there are some of you out there tonight that are like me when I was in AA, and you're telling yourself, these are things that I'll never do. I'll never do this, I'll never do that. Be careful. You'll wind up doing them. Believe me. I'm going to give you a couple of examples real quick, and I'm going to get out of here. One is I was standing on the fringes of a conversation one night when a guy was talking to these three older gentlemen in AA about a pile of bills that he had home that were that tall. And they explained to him what to do with them, which was to go home and write a letter to each one of his creditors, and if he could throw a buck in it, throw it in. And if he didn't have it, tell them when they were going to get one, and not overload himself. And what was unbeknownst to them, I thought, was that I had a pile of bills that tall too. And when I heard what they told him after ice cream that night, I went home and I started writing to my creditors. And about 1:45 in the morning, my phone rang. I said, hello? He said, are you done yet? They call us old-timers in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I really don't like that term. I don't like the term long-timers. I'd rather be called a semi-senior newcomer. Finally, I need to tell you one more thing about having fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. In 1979, I had the privilege of going on a cruise with 737 Alcoholics and Al-Anons. And on this cruise, one night, we had a scavenger hunt, and at the end of the scavenger hunt, we had broken up into groups, and at the end of the scavenger hunt, the cruise director said, and now we're going to have a beauty contest. He said, but it's going to be different. We're going to have men dressed up as women. Pride will take you a long ways in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they picked me. So they dressed me up in this moo-moo. I got a babushka, got some hoop earrings, got the war paint. I got a set of heels about that tall. I still don't know how you women walk on those. And I paraded out there with 16 other guys in the beauty contest. And I said to myself, man, I'm looking good. And I didn't win. Instant resentment. The guy who won was from the alternate lifestyle, and he had a head start. But these are the kind of things that I've done in Alcoholics Anonymous, and not because I wanted to do them. Sometimes I was too embarrassed to say no, and sometimes it just felt as if that was the thing to do. And the other one, many of the other times, the things that I've done in Alcoholics Anonymous, I just went back to what Rosalie told me. If I didn't want to do it, it was probably God's will and I better do it. And I've had a relationship with that new employer in my life, in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's very, very comfortable to me. I don't know how you're getting along with your employer, but I'm doing just fine. And if you're having a problem with this deal of coming to understand a God of your own, you can borrow one of ours. You can use one of ours until you get your own. And you can come to your own conclusion about this thing. We're not going to make any decision for you. One of the nice things that I like about Alcoholics Anonymous is the line in the book. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it. Not if you want what we have and I'm willing to drive it down your throat. No, if you want it, come get it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. I'd like to ask Jody if she would come up now.
everybody. My name is Jody, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Jody. And I turned 30 this year, and whoa, feels good. And it's a privilege and an honor to participate in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was in awe of hitting 30. It was just kind of like one of those monumental things. And so I'll share a little bit with you that my disease of alcoholism hasn't gone anywhere. My daughter threw a party for me, and so we kind of conferred just about a little bit. She's a black belt, Al-Anon, and she earned it, trust me, a day at a time. And so I got thrown out of the house so that everybody could do whatever it is they needed to do to dress the house up, and so I wasn't allowed to come home till a certain time, and finally called and I was allowed to go home. So driving home, and I'm really nervous about going to my own house to my own party, you know. Of course, the thought is nobody's going to show up. But and then the thought hit me, you know, if I was a drinking person, I'd probably go get drunk right now. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Here I'm going to be 30 and I'm still thinking about drinking. You know, it just, I love the topic, came to believe. It was interesting. I was sitting there and people were starting to talk about God, and I thought, well, how does that relate to the topic of came to believe? And it goes, oh yeah, come to believe in God. Oh yes. And I'm blonde. God knew what he was doing. And one of the there are two really monumental stories for me in reference to God and how he's taken me in sobriety. When I was really, really new, I was married, and we drank and used together, and I decided to get sober, and he didn't. And so he said something to the effect of, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. And I said, okay, I won't. I took my kids and my clothes and ran for my life and stayed clean and sober. And as good alcoholics and drug addicts, we had owed a lot of money. And I had a sponsor, and she was wonderful. And I said, you know, because the traditions, you know, and amends and all that kind of stuff immediately hit me. I was unemployable, okay? And I said, oh, my God, how am I going to pay back any of that money? Because I knew he wouldn't pay any of it back. And my sponsor had said to me, are you willing to pay back everything you owe? And I said, you know, I am willing. And that, you know, write a letter with $1 in it. She told me all those stories. And I thought, you know, now, granted, I'm no job, 2 small children, unemployable, but I was willing from the bottom of my heart. And so one day I get a phone call from my ex-husband. Well, at that time he was still my husband. And he said, I need your signature on the house. We either need a second mortgage or we need to sell it. La la. I said, you get my signature to sell that house. And as prices had gone, everybody had put a lien on the house. When we sold the house, every penny got paid. And that's how God worked in my life. And I hadn't even had a job yet. And so that was one of my first experiences. And it was to go down a few years in sobriety. I had wanted to move out of the state of California. I wanted to go further east. And I was looking through the newspaper, a recovery newspaper, and there was this ad for this hospital in Tucson, Arizona. And I thought, Tucson, Arizona, nice place. And I thought, I have perfect qualifications for this place. And so I called them, and they said, well, just so happens we have a job available, a position opened up, and why don't you come for an interview? So I did, and I went for the interview. It was a great interview, but they didn't give me any answer. And we visited some people while we were there, and this is like over Labor Day in Tucson, Arizona, visiting these people. So we go to the local outdoor, whatever it was, looking at all these cactuses, and only, mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the noonday sun in Arizona on Labor Day. And there we were, sightseeing, but anyway. So come back home, come to find out that, no, I did not get the job. And I was really angry. Now, I had really thought God set me up, that everything was perfect, that this was exactly what was going to happen, and it didn't happen. And And so I decided to get angry at God. And that lasted about 4 days. It didn't work for me. Now, I understand if you need to get angry with God and you want to try that, my hat's off to you. You try it. I tried it. It didn't work for me. I mean, I listen to what people say up here. I'll try something, and it may work and it may not. This one didn't, so. But anyway, I went to a meeting, and there was this 90-day newcomer who was so excited about this new job that he was an actor, and he went on this interview, and the interview was for a musician, and even though he wasn't a musician, he was an actor. But it turns out that the acting job was just to act to be a musician. And then he needed a tuxedo. It turns out he didn't have a tuxedo, but he happened to be living with somebody, and they had a tuxedo. And so everything just fell right into place, and God set it up for him, and wasn't God wonderful, and wasn't sobriety, and it was just wonderful, and I wanted to go for his jugular. There are 90 days, and here I am, years of sobriety, and I didn't get mine, and so I was bemoaning to one of the girls I sponsor, and she said something that to me was really, really profound, and she said, Jody, God gives those miracles to those newcomers to keep them coming back. She said, He knows that those of us who are here and committed will keep coming back anyway, so He saves us and puts us on the back burner. And something, that's a truth. That is the truth for me. And one of the things I love about coming to meetings like this is because I hear my peers. My home group was the Oldtimers meeting at Rafters for a long time until I got a job that I had to work at night. And I really miss it. And Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a place to have a whole new life, to have a whole new lifestyle. I grew up in a lifestyle where I did not learn any coping tools. And I managed to get into adulthood and have a family and still not have much coping tools. And then I get to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I still didn't have much coping tools. But as I've stayed here, I've learned how to apply some of these steps to give me some of these coping tools. And if you're new, or if you're in the middle, or if you're a peer, or if you have more time, that it's about suiting up and showing up, and about doing this stuff on a daily basis. And everyone who's been up here has said that. I have been able to. What I feel comfortable with is acknowledging when God's grace is working in my life. Acknowledging when I believe that God is really working in my life, because that affirms to me one more time that my God is taking care of me. And if you don't have a God, or your God is not as big as mine, I'll lend you mine. My God is so big that He can encompass anyone and anything. And that has been true for years. And by the grace of God, October 4th, 1975 was the date of my last drink and drug. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rich, I believe you have 25 or more, don't you? Yeah, why don't you come on up, Rich B. Hi, buddy. Good to see you.
How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good to see you too.
All right.
I'm Rich. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Rich.
Yeah, let's see. Everybody's supposed to take the same time here?
Yeah, about the same time. Yeah.
Well, let's see. I took my first drink when I was 6 or 7, I guess. And I smoked my first joint when I was like 14. And I dropped acid when I was 16. And when I was 17, I started getting fucked up every day. And then when I was 21, God spoke to me in a vision and told me not to use drugs. But He omitted the fact that alcohol is a drug. So I got drunk every day till I was 29. So I guess that qualifies me for this program. And when I got here, I didn't speak English. And the last friend that I had in the world, the only person who would really speak to me, because I was just like an animal, man. I was like, I didn't speak English, I didn't understand. Just kind of really, pretty low bottom. And it was my own, it was my own trip. And I never got pissed off at God for not telling me alcohol was a drug. But I do want to go back to that for a minute, because I was a drug addict, and I was a needle freak, and I took acid about 400 times, and I was totally addicted to marijuana, rum, vodka, heroin, coke, grass, whatever I could get my hands on. I would ingest it as quickly as I could, and I was a kind of crazy, impulsive, insane addict who would find his way to a connections house when they were cutting up the stuff, and ripping off the stuff, and running out the door. And I was driving a stolen sports car one time, and I slammed into about 15 parked hogs that belonged to a pretty well-established and well-known motorcycle club in the Los Angeles area, and they just piled them up my head hit the windshield, so there was blood pumping out of my head. And them guys were all inside the bar, see? So I went in the bar, and I walked up to the bar, and I said, "Give me a pitcher, man." Blood was squirting out of my head. So the guy gives me a pitcher, man, And so I just drank it. And then I thought, and those guys were all running out the front door. What the fuck? They're all running out the front door. Literally all hell broke loose. And so I went out the back door. Jumped up on the wall, jumped up on the roof of the bar. Looked, and I watched this whole thing, man, from up on the bar. I watched the cops get there. I watched the ambulance come and take the people away after the fight, man. I'm up on the bar, holding my head. So I was getting kind of weak from loss of blood, and adrenaline, shit, So I finally said I figured I better split, So I walked for a while. I don't really know how I got to the hospital, but so they went in there and they got the little round piece of bone that was punched out of my skull and pulled it back out and put it back perfect, and my old man paid for it. He always paid for everything and shit. But I just want to go back, because I only got a minute, to when God spoke to me. This convention theme is came to believe. Well, I always felt like I had a voice inside me, that kept me out of trouble. Like the voice that told me, go out the back door. Don't go back out the front door. Of course, I finished my beer, my pitcher, out the back door. So I always knew that the Lord spoke through, to me and kept me out of trouble zillions of times, man. I remember when all my acid head buddies were leaving Haight-Ashbury for Woodstock, man, and they said, "Come on, dude, come on, jump in." And I said, that voice told me, "Don't go, man, don't go in there." And I hitchhiked back to L.A. and I would have died if I fucking went to New York, man. I just would have died over there and stuff. And let me see. So God spoke to me in a vision, and when God speaks to you, it's God. And so He said, "Don't use drugs." He said, "Rich, don't use drugs." But at the moment that He spoke that, this is the main thing I want to say, is that my addiction was lifted off me. I never wanted to use drugs again. I never used drugs again. I didn't want to. I was an addict, man. And no program, no hospital, no. I didn't even have, withdrawals or anything from drugs. I mean, God hit me and healed me from drug addiction, but He just forgot to tell me about alcohol. And I don't know, I guess maybe He wanted to build some character in me or make me a character, or I don't know what He was doing, but, you know, I love God and I respect Him. And, you know, when He speaks to you, you know it. And so I got sober in the valley, and, you know, I see a lot of people at these conventions that, man, they were, you know, around when I was new. You know, I see them from the valley and stuff. It's a trip. And they got this thing over there, the archives. They're starting to try and write down the history of the program in the valley and then out here and stuff. And so they got a display over there by the meeting room. It's kind of cool. And they need to get that all written down, because we shouldn't forget where we come from. Thank you.
All right, Rich. Fran, I'd really like you to come up and share, would you? I think we have time. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fran, alcoholic.
Fran.
The room did fill up. That's cool. I was starting to take your inventories about not being here and stuff. And God, I hate when I get like that, because I get real picky, you know, and intolerant and impatient and all those things that drive everybody else crazy, but especially me. And so I'm very glad that the room filled up. And for these old timers, you know, these are the happenings in Alcoholics Anonymous. They're really important, really, really important to be here. You know, if you're an alcoholic like me, I'm sober since September 23rd, 1977, for which I'm very grateful. And if you're an alcoholic like me, you're looking for the party. You know, I am still looking for the party. I'm going to be 60 years old next year, and I'm 28 years sober, and I'm still looking for that buzz in the room. You know, and I felt it in this room today. You know, when the old timers were describing coming to Alcoholics Anonymous from the beginning, you know, and their experience in that, and looking at the great life that we've had. You know, it's just an absolute miracle that we're all here today. I mean, we should be dead. You know, Rich, I love your story. Oh my God, I heard so much today, because that is so cool that you listen to God. I never did listen to God. I mean, I just wouldn't listen, you know. And I know He was there. He did speak to me, you know. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, they said God hid Him in the one place that we would look last, and that was right inside. You know, I never realized that. And I've heard so many good things here today. Eric, I was thinking when Eric was talking that Chuck C. had the same kind of drinking history. You know, he would sit in the bars and talk about God, you know. And Eric and a few other people said they weren't afraid of God when they were out there. They weren't, you know, they didn't have this resentment with God. I had a horrible fear and resentment toward God, you know. And when you cut yourself off from your source, you know, you're screwed. You know, so there I was out there. You know, God was trying to talk to me all the time. I wouldn't listen, couldn't listen, you know, and I was like this leaf in the wind, you know, whatever way the wind blew, let's go. You know, if I can find something that's going to make me feel good, if I can go in a direction that you say is okay, your opinion on everything was always better. You were the ultimate authority, you know, because I didn't have the tools to get along in this world. So I really was, you know, a real catastrophe out there. And when I finally landed in Alcoholics Anonymous and you guys told me the simple message, you know, like Don said, you know, the secret, you know, if you don't drink that first drink, you're not going to get drunk, you know. There was something inside of me, and I have to believe that that was God, that wanted something more for me, you know, that has a plan for me. And I believe that's true today. You know, this last year for me has been probably the hardest year of my sobriety. My husband's been really sick. He's sick today. That's why he's not here. There's 3 of our old-timers on our panel, Claudette, Ted, and Jim, just weren't well enough, you know, to make this meeting today. And believe me, I know all 3 of them, and they would give their left arm to be here. They would rather be here than any place else in the world. And, sometimes you just have to be alone with God. Sometimes that's the way these things go. And it's been hard this last year to watch someone that I love so much be so sick so much of the time. And Tommy's here, Tommy and Carrie, my God, their trip this last year in their own lives. And, it sometimes gets very heavy. And, today is kind of a heavy day for me. It is a heavy day. I don't notice it a lot, in my daily life because I take it a day at a time. I live each moment to the fullest. When we're at home and we're in that environment, it's comfortable. It's when the events come up, like this convention, when I'm used to saying, let's go, and we go. And I'm waiting usually for my husband to stop talking, at 4 in the morning in the parking lot, so that I can go home, because that's the kind of drunk he is. He loves Alcoholics Anonymous and he loves its people. And I do too. But, these are the days when I notice that there is something different in my life, And these are the days when God carries me. Frankly, this is when I really live in footsteps, and if you're new and you don't know what footsteps is, it's when you're walking along the beach and you see one set of footprints and you realize, you think that God isn't there, and you realize that those footprints are God's, and that He's carrying you, and if you're alcoholic, I don't care how long or how little or you're sober, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because that's who we are. And we get what we need. That power, that resource, that I surrendered to when I came to my first meeting has been carrying me for 28 years. Last weekend I had an experience where one of the girls that I've been sponsoring since she was 2 days sober came and swooped me up and took me to San Luis Obispo, and 2 of the other girls that I've been sponsoring for almost 20 years, both of them put me up at the Sycamore Mineral Hot Springs, and got to do the spa thing for 2 or 3 days and go to meetings up in San Luis and take a walk in the woods, and forget, about anything. God provided this great setting and this great feeling, that I still have a connection to God. Because frankly, I've been angry at God this last year. Angry, and it's a subtle kind of a thing. When you're sober a long time, you learn to do what you're supposed to do regardless of your feelings. You just do it. You're on automatic almost. But there's something going on down in here. And I've been kind of just going like this, don't really want to look at it, don't want to really bring it up. And my original resentment always goes back to God. That was the one I had when I was a child. That was the one that it's, and in my inventories, I still get in touch with, okay, you're just mad at God again. You're not getting your way, and you don't want to accept His will. And I got in touch with that in that beauty in that woods, walking, looking at nature, which helps me so much when I'm feeling like that. And I got in touch with that fact one more time, and again, the power and the love. I know that there is a loving God in my life. I know that loving God has always been like that, and I don't want to be at odds with that power. I really don't. So, for me, I've been getting what I needed, all this time. And in the last few days, that resentment has been going. I've been able to sit down and do my prayer and meditation in the morning and make that connection on a daily basis and feel that essentially, even though things may not be the way that I want them, essentially everything is really okay, It was talked about last night, God doesn't make too hard terms with those who seek Him, but you got to seek. And one of my other sponsors, Dawn mentioned Rosalie. She still is my heart. She's been gone since I was 12 years sober, and she sponsored me for 10 years. Rosalie used to say, the God in me salutes the God in you. you know. And she used to say, when you walk into any place, no matter where it is, an AA meeting, you know, work, play, anywhere, you say, you know, God bless this place and everybody in it, you know. And that puts God in the mix. And Doris, who sponsored me after Rosalie died, you know, used to say, God in every sentence, God at every turn, you know. And those are the things that I try to implement in my daily life, you know, the spiritual principles. And I learn something new all the time, especially from the Oldtimers. I love John so much because I've seen John grow over the years. You know, John was about 13 years sober when I first met him, you know, and he was dripping with all this, the gold chains and the open shirt, you know, black hair, you know, and he was slick, you know. But he was, you know, he was my old timer then. You know, I was brand new, you know, and he and his first wife, Jan, used to come to the San Fernando speaker meeting on Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember what it was. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was perfect for a drunk like me. I was trying to hide, you know, and there were maybe 3 or 4 people in that meeting. But I would come in there, and John would just listen, you know, and I would babble like I'm doing right now. He's still doing it. He's still listening, you know, thank God, you know. Poor John, but you know, it's wonderful to hear the message from someone that you've seen grow, because you see the genuineness, you know, the realness in their lives. And the thing that John gave me today is interesting, because I always try to think about Bill Wilson and the stuff that he went through, you know, when he was trying to get this thing off the ground. My God, do you know how many shots were fired at Bill Wilson? I mean, like, I don't know how he did it, you know. But he often said that in steps 6 and 7, you know, where it says about defects of character, and the next step says shortcomings. Okay, he says he didn't want to be redundant. He meant the same thing, but he had to use different wording, you know, because he was a writer and he wanted it to be interesting. And when John said today, you know, the shortcoming was, and I have to ask him about this again because I don't remember it exactly, but the connection I made was the shortcoming was not accepting the fact that I have defects of character that I have to give to God, you know. And I thought, you know, even Bill Wilson was used. Bill thought he just wasn't being redundant. You know, what was really happening was God was writing those steps, you know, and each person was going to get them in whatever way they got them, you know. And that's how he uses all of us. You know, each person here, no matter how long you're sober or how little you're sober, you have a special gift. And that gift is that you can reach another alcoholic when nobody else can. You know, when nobody else can. If you're brand new and you haven't been through the steps yet, that's okay. You know where a directory is, use that directory. You know, if you have a car, you can take a person to the meeting. Take them to where the message is. You know, if you know where the bathrooms are, you know, if you know where the coffee is, you know, direct that person, you know. For me, I was so self-obsessed when I got here, I couldn't pour you a cup of coffee because I was afraid I couldn't do it right, you know, and that kept me from pouring you a cup of coffee, you know. And what I learned in these meetings is it doesn't matter how you do it, just do it, you know. There's a freedom in that. I really didn't want to get up here because I know I'm an emotional basket case today. I just am, you know, I am really emotional. This stuff, bringing all the, you know, it's like I was raised on this kind of stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous, coming to conventions and doing these things. And, you know, I miss my husband today. I have to say, I have to be honest. They told me when I was new, tell us what it's like for you today. You know, don't try to put a face on. You know, be honest about how you feel. And I know this too shall pass, you know. When I get home, that's when it'll pass. But it's been wonderful being with you guys, and I thank you. And thank you, Eric, for leading a great meeting.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.